Most wars in history are fought between people. Nations versus nations, armies versus armies, ideologies clashing for dominance. But what if I told you there was a war that Australia fought against birds? And not just any birds, but emus, tall, fast, flightless birds related to ostriches. And here's the kicker: Australia lost. It sounds like a joke, like satire, or a scene from a comedy movie. But this really happened. In 1932, the so-called Great Emu War took place. An armed conflict between the Australian Army and about 20,000 emus that were terrorizing farms and crops in Western Australia. Today we'll explore the whole story. Why it happened, what the battles looked like, why soldiers with machine guns struggled against birds, and what came afterward. And of course, we'll see why this bizarre episode became one of the funniest and most absurd chapters of 20th century history. Welcome to the story that proved being big, armed, and well-trained doesn't guarantee victory, especially when your enemy is a flock of birds. To understand why Australia went to war with birds, we need to look at the background of this strange conflict. It was 1932. The world was still recovering from the Great Depression. Australia was hit hard. Agricultural prices collapsed, farmers lost income, and many struggled to survive. In Western Australia, especially in the Campion and Chandler districts, farmers tried to grow wheat. It was a tough life, but one of the few ways to feed their families. The government had even encouraged World War I veterans to settle on land and start farming. This was supposed to be a reward for their service. They were given land to cultivate. But soon an unexpected problem arrived, and that problem was emus. The emu is a giant flightless bird, growing up to 2 meters tall and weighing around 40 kilograms. It can run at speeds of 50 kilometers per hour and is surprisingly tough. In normal times, emus wandered across the Australian outback. But after breeding season, they migrated toward agricultural lands where food was abundant. Suddenly, some 20,000 to 30,000 emus appeared in the wheat fields. They devoured crops, trampled fences, and caused chaos. The fences they broke also allowed rabbits to enter, making the damage even worse. Farmers were desperate. They were already struggling with low wheat prices, and now their fields were vanishing, not because of drought or pests, but because of birds. So they took action. They petitioned the government for help. And since many were veterans, they asked specifically for military assistance. Their thinking was simple. If the army could fight men in war, surely it could handle birds in the outback. At first, the government hesitated, but farmers were persistent. Finally, the Minister of Defense, Sir George Pierce, gave in. The army would intervene. A small military unit was sent, led by Major G. P. W. Meredith. They brought with them 2 Lewis machine guns and around 10,000 rounds of ammunition. The plan seemed straightforward. Go to the fields, wait for the emus to appear, then mow them down. It was expected to be quick, efficient, and effective. In reality, what followed would become a legendary fiasco. The first action began in November 1932 near Campion. Soldiers spotted about 50 emus and opened fire. But the birds scattered immediately. Most survived. A second attempt involved mounting a machine gun on a truck to chase down flocks. But the terrain was rough, the truck too slow, and the gunner couldn't aim properly. The emus simply outran the vehicle. After several days, reports were grimly comical. Hundreds of bullets fired, only a handful of birds down. It turned out that fighting emus was not simple at all. They behaved like a guerrilla army, splitting into small groups, running in different directions, impossible to trap. One soldier remarked, "If the emus had a military leader, they would be unstoppable." Major Meredith tried again with new tactics, but results were the same. Whenever they tried to hit large flocks, the birds dispersed. When they waited near waterholes, the emus didn't show up. In the first 2 weeks, the unit fired over 2,500 rounds. Only about 200 emus were confirmed dead. That's over 10 bullets per bird, and those were the official numbers. In truth, the success rate was even worse. The press quickly noticed. Newspapers laughed at the military's failure. Headlines read things like, "Australia at war with emus and losing." Farmers felt humiliated, and the army became a joke. Eventually, the government ordered the operation to stop. The army withdrew, and the emus had won. Of course, the emus didn't sign a peace treaty. They simply kept wandering the fields, eating wheat. Farmers still had to deal with them. Eventually, the government provided farmers with fences and later introduced bounty systems for shooting emus. But the legend of the Great Emu War lived on. The image of a modern army with machine guns being outsmarted by birds was too good to forget. Major Meredith himself admitted that emus were incredibly resilient. He reported seeing birds run hundreds of meters after being shot. He famously said, "If we had a military division with the bullet-carrying capacity of these birds, it would face any army in the world. If the emus were armed, they would be unbeatable." And that sums up the absurd brilliance of this episode. The Great Emu War was short, bizarre, and comical, but it also showed how desperate farmers were during the Depression. Today, we see it as a curiosity, a chapter of history that sounds like parody. A war Australia officially fought and lost against birds. If nothing else, the Emu War proves that history isn't always grand battles and epic struggles. Sometimes it's about soldiers chasing birds across wheat fields with machine guns and realizing the birds are winning. So next time you hear the word war, remember, not all wars are long, bloody affairs between nations. Some last only a few weeks, take place in the Australian countryside, and end with emus victorious.